She's in here.
Where is
Yeah.
she? What are you doing?
I was looking for the answers to those questions.
We can skip those. We
You
can do
don't
those
have-
later.
Well, you don't have the answers to
No, I
this.
didn't.
Don't need the answers, just need the questions.
Yeah.
Well, do you remember what's in your yearbook, Dad? Some of these are yearbook ones.
Oh, those. Well, that's the one that you had when I was 85.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Okay.
I just don't remember.
Well, I think
The
I
answers.
think I know.
Okay, you know them all. Because I know you were in
Number
some
3.
Clear Club or Claire Club.
Number 3.
We have some more.
Put this back here. Do you want some water?
No.
I'm just gonna put this
I
right
think
here.
it was actually all of the above.
Do you want some?
If you can get some easy.
Okay. Brian said we can sit here and here.
Yeah, so we can hear you better with the mic.
Well, didn't you need? I mean, the ripples is the one you would need.
This is high school.
Well,
High
I mean,
school.
we're gonna.
Very good, Mom. That's very good.
You see Le Pen conceded?
Who?
That right-wing woman in France. She lost.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. That's what they did.
Was it close?
Oh, just the headline. I couldn't
Oh,
see if it was
okay.
close.
I knew they weren't as stupid as we are.
Say Europe exhales.
Yeah. They didn't think that she would win, but they.
Well, yeah.
She
But
stirred up a lot.
Well,
We
you
didn't
can't
think-
know anymore. You
That's
just
right,
don't
we didn't
know.
think-
Right. Look at the
We
dirty
didn't think
tricks
so.
that happened right at the end.
Isn't this thing about him making this? He loves to write these orders.
Tweets. Oh, the orders. Oh, yeah, the
Yeah.
executive orders.
Yeah, and you know the last one they wrote that was about the religious
Mhm.
church as well. It's not going to make any difference. That one doesn't make really any difference.
A lot of them don't make any
No.
difference.
Mhm.
And, you know, he's so religious.
Yeah,
He's
well,
such a good Christian.
but you know he was well he claimed that he was a Protestant, but he claimed he was a member of this Presbyterian church in New York, and they said they have no record.
Of course not. He
Yeah.
lies all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know why we even bother to believe anything he says.
Well, people like to write stuff down.
Yeah.
I think the media gives him an awful lot of attention.
Yeah, they're trying to figure out how to adjust, you know, that, but they're not doing. I'm not sure that they don't think
Yeah.
they've got it yet.
Macron got
Yeah.
65% of the vote.
Oh, that's pretty significant.
What did the other get?
Well, less than 35, I expect.
Well, I just, well, I guess of the vote, then it's 100%.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I didn't
Well,
know how
more
many
than-
people voted. You know what I mean?
Was there more than
Let's
two
see.
people you could choose from? Or
No,
was it
this
two
was-
major ones. I know.
They narrowed
was
it
the
down
runoff.
2 weeks ago to
Oh,
those
just
two.
then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
Which was a shock in itself because all the major parties were out.
Yeah.
Neither one of them had parties.
So it's kind of like here in
Yeah.
a way, and that the regular major
Yeah.
parties are not.
They don't have a parliament's going to be weird.
Ah. That's Dad's yearbook.
I thought that was.
I think the one that we had there
Oh, this
was
is
a
19
hardback one.
This is 1944.
It was the Bridgewater College one, wasn't it? Oh,
Yeah,
maybe not.
Well, it was the ripples.
Anyway, Mom, we won't worry about it.
Shirley,
Okay.
let
You
me
wanna
see.
get-
Let
you
me
wanna
see
get-
that one there, Shirley.
Troutbill.
Let me see the trout bill.
Because I thought it was a hardback one, but anyway,
Did
we
you? Mhm.
we'll get started. We can always do more tomorrow.
Yeah, we can just do a little bit tonight.
Because yeah, it's getting late enough. It
44.
might get tired.
Yeah, 44. You see, I graduated in 47.
Oh, okay.
That's when would have all that stuff in it.
Well, I'm impressed you can even find that, Mom. I can't.
We do have all those, pretty much, those are all together.
I think
Both
I
our
can
college
find
and
out.
high school.
So tomorrow, if we want to, we can dig those
Yeah.
out and see.
You were vice president of the literary club. I didn't realize that in there.
Oh, you learned something again.
How about that?
Something new.
Let's see, I wonder what I did as vice president of the literary club.
You were just. It was just a title.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Went for the fame.
So do you have the camera all set up?
Yep.
Ready to go?
Get your wagon to a star and JP Bowman.
Probably started in time, I guess. You know how to edit it. Ken.
It's on.
What'd
Yeah, I
you
know
say,
how to
edit?
it.
Do you
Well-
know how to edit this, Brian?
Do you want me to start kind of at the beginning, or what?
Sure. Yeah, start at the beginning
I
about
think
what you
so.
remember them telling you about your,
Yeah,
you
well,
know, your.
and this
babyhood.
actually is a better outline to start with than
Absolutely.
this is right here.
Yeah, because that was for fun for your
But
85th.
it's still fun, but these are neat things too.
Yeah. So go ahead and start out with that if that's if you think that's a good start.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to start out with Uncle Cecil finding me while I was born in October 10th, 1929, and was adopted by Dietz and Laura Rogers in 19. See, the interesting thing about that is that they didn't legally adopt me for a couple of years.
Yeah, I
Because
was.
that was just the way things were then.
Well, you lived there before you were adopted.
Yeah.
It was less formal.
Yeah,
I guess.
less formal. And I was. My mother was. Her last name was Broyles, and she was a teenager, and was moved to Cleveland, Ohio, and I was born in the Cleveland General Hospital in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1929. And then shortly after that, my mother moved to Richmond with me to live with some relatives in Richmond, Virginia. And she had, this isn't very well organized.
It doesn't. No, this is conversation, so that's fine. And I was curious. Do you know her first name? Did you know?
I do not know her first name.
How'd you spell? How does she spell the last name spelled?
Broyles. Broyles. And she moved to Richmond with some of her relatives, and she was actually a member of the Luray Church of the Brethren, where my Uncle Cecil Showalter was a pastor. And he was very influential in what happened in my life because he was concerned about what would happen to her child because she had decided that she could not keep me to raise me since she was so young. And my Uncle Cecil knew that my parents had been married 5 years and didn't have a child, and the prospects looked dim that they would be able to give birth to a child. So he called them and asked if they would be interested in adopting me because I was at this time probably close to a year old. And he discussed my background with them and told them a little more about the family. And they said yes, they were interested in taking me as their child.
So you say Uncle Cecil. So who's? How was that relationship in the family?
Yeah, he was married to my mother's sister.
Okay,
Her name was Glenna.
Glenna. Yeah.
And so then he talked with them, and then I don't know how the detail of the arrangements, except that he talked with the Broyles family, and then he, in December of 1930, he brought me down to my folks' place, and I guess they hadn't met me before then, and that was I was a year and 2 months old then because I was born in October And then I lived there, and I was kind of slow in learning to walk. I was after a year old because I didn't walk at that time. I was learning to walk after I went there. And I remember them telling me the story of learning to walk. We had in the house there a hallway that was between two rooms, I guess, or 2.5 rooms, and they helped me to learn to walk back and forth in that hallway. And so that was where those early years I learned that. And I don't know how long it really took me to walk pretty stably.
So that was in that house that,
That was in
grandmother's,
Yeah.
your mother's father built for.
Yeah, well,
On that
my
property.
father gave them the land.
Okay.
Yeah, and
And
they
they
actually
built the
gave
house.
my parents a lot, and then gave a lot to my Aunt Claudine, another sister of my mother's, next door, and so they could. And my parents then built a house on that lot, and
That's a very cool house.
Yeah, it was
Did you like
really-
that house too?
Mhm.
I really liked
really
that house.
nice house.
And that's where
and,
you grew up, so
yeah.
you didn't. That's what you knew.
Mhm.
I thought it was a very cool house.
Yeah, it's what I knew. They had just basically one bedroom on the main floor,
Mm-hmm.
and then the attic was divided into 2 rooms up there, and I was one of those rooms is where I.
I only got to
slept
sleep
in
in
the
there
room.
one time, and I thought that was the coolest
Did you really?
thing.
Did you?
Only one time when I was older. Other
Mhm.
than that, we just slept on the floor. I didn't grandmother's
Yeah.
bedroom. We stayed over.
Oh, okay.
But that room was.
Mhm. Yeah, and then my parents, I know they had to borrow the money to build that house, and it was, it was just shortly after the Depression, and they really did not have much in terms of finances, and they nearly lost that house. But the loan person who was named Mr. Ramsey, that's the name I learned to remember that name, and he was very, very good and worked with my parents on, giving them extra time to pay some of their monthly payments and save their house. Because they were really, I know there was a lot of anxiety whether they would be able to keep that. And they were, which was very good. But anyway, then one of the things that was very interesting, I don't really remember, but my birth mother came to visit me, and at least for the first couple years that I was there, but she stopped coming when she thought I was old enough that I would remember her,
Didn't
And,
want to confuse the
and it would be
situation.
confusing.
Yeah.
And so it was a very nice thing to do. I don't remember ever feeling angry about her not keeping me, and I just kind of accepted that she wasn't able to do it.
And she made sure that you were in a good place.
Yeah, and that she did want
checked and
she
made
did want to
sure.
make sure that I had a good home,
Mhm.
and that she had visited there, and she knew my adoptive parents,
Mhm.
and felt reasonably okay, I guess. So. And somewhere in this period, and I don't know exactly, I wish I knew the details of this, but my parents, Dietz and Laura, also took a girl in their home, and I guess to see whether they wanted to adopt another child and have 2. But I didn't. Her name was Eloise.
Was she older than you?
Yeah, she was older.
Considerably
And-
older.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean,
Oh.
not a lot older, I don't think. But I don't know how much. Maybe 2 or 3 years older. But anyway, they. I think it was primarily my mother felt that that wasn't working out very well, so they did not keep her. And I don't know anything else about that, which is kind of strange. But it was one of those things never talked about very much.
Yeah.
I think.
It was awkward, I guess.
I think that's right. It really was. Yeah, and I didn't. I wasn't very inquisitive. I didn't ask a lot of
Well,
questions. I guess.
I mean, there's no reason for you to
Which
really.
would
You
have
don't
been
know
nice,
any different.
You would think, thinking back now, I wish I had a list of questions that I would think. I don't know what kind of answer.
That's why we've got you on camera here.
Yeah, that's
We're
right.
trying
Yeah,
to
right.
get those things.
But
Well,
anyway,
one thing I wanted to talk about is your name.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I found that interesting.
I mean, of course, they had the privilege of naming me, and I guess my birth mother didn't have any say in that, and maybe didn't mind. I mean, that they would choose a name. And I don't know much about the discussion on that, but I know there was some discussion about a name, and my parents hadn't really decided what that would be. But one of my mother's aunts, Jenny Murray, made a suggestion that, well, why don't you? They liked the name of David, and she said, well, why don't you just name him David Livingston? And so that's what they did. And
Anything significant about the Livingston part of that?
well, I think there is. There was a missionary to Africa that was named David Livingston, and that was Livingston was his last name. And well, they're part of the story is the tradition of that name that he got lost in Africa, and there were people out looking for him and hoping they would find him. And there was a man by the name of Stanley who encountered him back somewhere in the jungle, the tradition says, and saw him and recognized him and said, Dr. Livingston, I presume. And, but anyway,
You don't use that.
as I grew up, I did
Very
not,
much.
I didn't
Not
really like that
Livingston.
name. My mother liked it, my adopted mother liked the name a lot. And I did not like it, of course. So I went by the name of David L. and would always use my middle initial whenever I had to use a middle name. And kept that pretty much that way whenever I had any say in using my name. And so many times when I had to give officially my name, I just said David L. Rogers. And that was what I used. And there weren't many times that I had to use David Livingston, but there were a few occasions when I did. And this is way down the road, but one of the most interesting occasions was in my first pastorate at the Oakland Church of Brethren. One of the lay people there was in my office one day and saw my hymn book that had my full name on it. And Bethany, when we graduated from Bethany at that time, Bethany Seminary, they put our names in gold on a hymn book and gave everybody a hymn book. And they had put in my name, David Livingston Rogers, on the front of the hymn book. And so this layperson saw that name, and he was delighted in using that name the next time he saw me, and frequently using it whenever we were together.
Especially knowing you weren't all that fond
That's
of it.
right, yeah. And, but his name was Fred Bear, and he delighted in using that name, and even sometimes shortened it. But he teased me a lot about that name. But anyway, to get back to the younger days, I was, of course, it was determined I was going to be an only child in the family, and we didn't have any neighbors close by that were my age. But we did have some wonderful neighbors that were across the road from us. And there were two older guys, Bill and Ed Murray. And they were just really nice to let me tag along with them when they would do stuff. It was pretty interesting at times, and did some adventuresome kinds of things. And I was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years younger than Billy, who was the younger of the two boys.
They were Murrays, but they weren't related? Or?
No, they're not related at all. They were just, and I don't remember anything about their dad, but their mother was really a nice neighborly person.
They let you tag along.
They did, yeah. And one of the neat things about it, later on in history, Bill Murray married a person by the name of Virginia, and they bought a piece of property right next door to our property there and built a house there. And so we knew them as adults too. And we actually when I had down on their property and got a couple of Christmas trees from their property. And I don't, you don't remember where that was, but it was down near Blue Ridge, which was, east of where we lived about 5 or 6 miles, and went back on the farm and cut a tree. And that was in the days when we had beautiful trees, we thought, but they wouldn't have won any awards.
We were happy with them.
We were happy with them. That's exactly right.
I do remember going one time.
Yeah.
I mean, I was always so cold.
Yeah, it was
So
cold.
cold.
Yeah, it really is right. But we did have fun doing that. We tried to wrap you all up pretty well. But that was a lot of fun getting those trees and that was a tradition for a number of years. And we got as I say, we always had pictures of them. And,
Some of the pictures.
I know. We thought that was the best tree. It looks a little scraggly then.
yeah,
but-
really pretty scraggly. Some of them were. That's right. Yeah. Then there wasn't anything particularly exciting about my growing up years, I don't think, except that I was an only child, and I remember being, kind of lonely at times because there wasn't anybody real close to play with.
What about cousin Rachel?
Well, but that was before they moved. They didn't move there until after I was in late elementary school.
Okay.
Actually, almost when Rachel started in high school.
So much later. Than
Yeah, it
they
was
were-
much
they moved
later.
over there.
That they were there, and Rachel was my age, but then Bobby was her brother was 3 years younger than I
Okay.
was, and he wasn't. We didn't play together a lot, but
So there's really
We
nobody
were-
next door for a
no,
long,
there
long
wasn't
time.
anybody next door. We were friendly and that kind of thing, and we did some things together, but didn't get together a lot to play games. I mean, like baseball or anything like that. But James Flora and Paul Garber were second cousins, and they lived on the road between Bonsack and Cloverdale. And so we got together some when we was a little older, and either would ride bikes, and they were part of our baseball group when we'd get together on Sundays, mainly Sunday afternoon, and play baseball. And that was up in Murray's pasture field, which was right across from where grandmother built that second house.
Okay, but that was a little ways away from the first house. So.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was.
Quite a
I could
ways.
could ride my bike up there. It was like about 4 miles up
Yeah.
there. And
But that probably wasn't that busy highway.
no, it wasn't so busy. No,
Not
it
then, it
wasn't.
wasn't.
It was just a 2-lane road up there. And then especially when I was old enough to ride. Well, when I got my bike, then I could ride. But I was like 12 or 13 when I got my first bicycle. And there was a.
But that was a big sense of
It
freedom.
was a big sense of freedom, and it was I remember it was a used bike because as I said we didn't have a lot of resources, but I do remember that when I woke up on Christmas morning and the bike was in the living room, and it was a used bike, but I was really happy with it. And then let's see, about 6 months later, or that summer, I got my first paper route. So
That you could do on your bike.
that I could do on my bike, yeah, and that was an afternoon route, and I started. I mean, I had a route of I don't know how many people I had, but then I expanded that route and made it a lot bigger than it was, and so it was really nice during the week, but then on Sundays, of course, the Sunday paper was a lot bigger, and it was a lot heavier and took longer. But I was really happy with that route. And then about 6 months after that, I got the morning paper route. So I had a morning route and an afternoon route. And I didn't realize that was a lot.
That's a lot.
Because, well, the morning route was a shorter route. It was in the town of Bonsack, and I could do that in less than an hour, I think. But maybe it had like 30 or 40 people. And then
Did you do that year round? That would be pretty
Yeah.
awful in the winter. I mean, my
It
gosh.
wasn't much fun in the winter, but and then in the afternoon I didn't. As I say, I had to ride. I had my bike, of course, and I rode the route in the afternoon. Took probably an hour and a half to do.
So in the wintertime, were there some weather days or did it stay mild enough?
Oh, well, no, we'd have snow, and there was sometimes,
Did you do it on your bike?
yeah.
Okay, I did too, yeah.
And I still, one of the hardest things was riding the bike, and the bike had fenders on it, of course, then,
When you get
and snow would get up
Get
in
packed
there.
up
in
and
there,
pack in there,
Then you have to stop
have to stop and
unbag
dig
the
it out,
snow.
yeah. And so that was really not very much fun. But I was thinking about saving. I saved most all that money for college, and I realized how then I just didn't spend much money even for a bottle of pop. You know, I was save this money for college. You know? And what I actually did during that time, of course, I had kept a record of it. But the money I made, and the money I made then working on the farm in the summer, I saved, and I actually gave that to my father, because it would help with the bills and things like that. And then he paid me back when I went to college.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it really worked
Yeah,
out really
that's cool.
nicely.
And he worked at, was it Hieronymus?
Well, he
store
worked
where
actually. He had a couple different jobs. He worked for a period of time. He worked. He sold vacuum cleaners, and he didn't. He had a couple years of college, but he had worked to help support his family. My grandfather was not a very stable person, his dad, and so my father and one of his brothers actually worked to support my grandmother and then a couple of the children as they were growing up. So that's where a lot of
That's
his
where all
support
that
went.
money went.
Yeah.
That he did.
And but he did that. He sold vacuum cleaners, and then we had chickens. We raised those and sold the eggs.
You loved that.
I really did. That was great. But then he got a job. He worked for Hieronymus, which was a department store for a lot of years, and that was a good steady job for
Well-known
him.
story.
Yeah, it
well-known
was very nice.
Hmm.
And then after that, he had a business. He had a business background and some business training, and he got a job for Roanoke Dairy, and he worked in the office for Roanoke Dairy for a number of years, and that was good for him. And his health wasn't real good part of that time, and of course he died when he was 53.
Mm.
So
Very young.
it's hard to think about how young that was.
Mhm.
But you found a picture of him here at Manchester,
Yeah.
right?
And yeah,
Was it basketball or?
he came to the Manchester Academy and went for 2 years, and I still haven't looked up in the archives, but there's a picture of him I have of him being on the basketball team, and so
I
he
thought that was so amazing.
yeah,
What,
it's cool. It's
see what year?
1928.
Okay, 28.
Yeah. So he was actually the first member of the Rogers family that came to Manchester.
How about that? How about that?
And that was really neat because I had that picture before we moved here, but I didn't have any idea that he came to school out here. But he didn't get to finish school again because he was helping to support the family, and he got married. He and my mother got married a little later in life. He was about 30, I think, because he was working, and they lived in Florida at that time, and he was working to support the family.
How old were you when you threw that stick up on electricity?
Oh,
Mm.
yeah, I hadn't gotten to that yet.
Well, you were kind of young, weren't you?
Yeah, well,
He jumped to the paper route. That was a good memory.
that was the paper route. But then we had at our property there, we had about an acre and a half of land, and so but then we bought a cow and we rented a pasture field across the road, and
How weird.
there was our house was here, and then the main highway 460 was here, and then across the road was a pasture field, and there was a little barn down there, well, a bigger barn that the people had. We got to keep the cow in that, and then from that field there was a creek, and then there was a railroad. The NW Railroad ran right by there, and so we
On the
had
other
trains
side of the
on the on the other side of the creek.
Okay.
It wasn't really a river. And then, following that, so we had one cow where we had the milk from that cow, and we never did breed it or have any calves or anything like that. But I milked the cow responsible for the cow when I got home from school.
Mhm.
And then one weekend, then they, as progress went along, they built. There was more electricity, and we always had electricity down through there, but they expanded the electricity, and they built a transforming unit in that field. And of course, the people made some money from the building of that.
Mhm.
So there was this huge electric transformer, and there was a fence around it. Oh, it was about probably about 25 feet in diameter, 25 or 30, I guess. And so it was all locked up and everything. But one day when I was down to take care of the cow, I wasn't going to milk it, I don't think. I had this long stick, and I threw it across the fence and up across the wires, and it connected and caused a short.
I mean, did you see it go zzz?
Yeah, you could see the big ball of fire, you know,
Oh my god.
and sparks all coming from that, and then so it was just zoom like that for a little while, and then it.
What did you
then
do?
Nothing. I was really kind of scared.
I could see why.
I turned around and ran back up to the house, and it must have been a Saturday because my dad was there, and I told them about that, and my dad didn't get real upset, but anyway, he decided he would go and do some checking, and because what happened was the electricity from all that
Uh-oh.
from I don't know a couple miles down the road went out because it shorted the whole system. And so my dad, we saw electrical trucks coming down, and so my dad went down when they were down at the transformer, and my dad went down there
What happened?
and was, asking them about what, how big a problem this was, and I don't know whether he actually told them, but one of the guys said to my dad, he said that kid is probably still running. I still remember that. And I was.
So about how old were you? Were you in elementary school then?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was probably. I don't know, 7th grade maybe.
Oh, older. Okay.
Well, it could have been 6th or 7th grade. Yeah, something like that.
Oh, that's.
I don't
a
think
big,
I was in
big
high
deal.
school.
Did you get in trouble for it? Did you get punished for that?
No, I really did. He was.
Wow, I'm
Dad
kinda surprised.
He was really nice about it. I mean, he just kind of. He laughed about it because, but it's as well as I remember anyway. But he didn't punish me. I'm sure. Of that.
Oh.
And but they, I don't know how much it
Yeah.
cost, but they said, they got it fixed pretty quickly. Just had to take it off, and I don't know what whether they had what else they had to do.
Power of a boy with a stick.
Yeah, that's something. I didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, I just thought it was, but I just remember he said that kid is still running.
They have those fuse, just like houses. They're these big long fuses. So probably burnt one or two of those fuses.
That's probably That's
Just
probably.
snap
You
it
know,
out.
way back when that would have just
Yeah.
been what that would be.
And they could replace that. Yeah, they would. It didn't take them too long, I don't think. But,
Still running.
but it did. It did knock out the electricity for down as far as there was a place called Corner Springs, which was down at least a mile, and it was at least that far. And I don't know if it went further than that or not.
Oh,
Probably
I would have
made
been.
you-
I'm not sure. I would have told. I probably would have gone and it's still running.
Made you behave for a long time then after that.
Uh-huh.
Made you behave for quite a long
It
time.
really did. Yeah, I didn't throw any more sticks.
Straightened up. Yeah, probably not to this day.
I know that was pretty good though. I was able to make it, get it across the wire.
The
so
power.
the short circuit.
Wow. All the places to throw a stick in that big wide open
Isn't that
countryside, and that's
Yeah.
what we do.
But I had to see if I could get a stick across.
Good
there.
job.
Yeah, I did pretty well. Yeah. But I was really pretty scared. I can remember that.
So you had dogs too. You liked
we
dogs.
had the first dog that I had was named Trixie, and that was my favorite of all the dogs that I had, and was really a good companion because Trixie was really a nice dog. I think we found Trixie, so we first got.
Just kind of showed up. And
Yeah, I think
kept her.
that's right. And but tamed her, and she really was a good dog, and was around and
Hung out with you all the time.
hung out with me all the time, and everywhere I went, and would sit. If I sat out on the steps, on the back door there, she she would sit there with me, and I could talk to Trixie and tell her everything I wanted to know. And then we got another, Spitz, it's called the Spitz brand, and there was a little white dog, and I can't remember how we got that dog. I think somebody gave us that one. And then, so then the
What
dogs
was that one's name?
ran together.
What was that one's name?
Mickey. It was Mickey. And then, and the dogs they got along well together. And
Oh, you still
ran
had Trixie at that point.
We still had Trixie, yeah. And then, that was, we had Trixie at least a couple of years while we still had that dog. And then one Sunday we came home from Sunday school. Well, that morning we didn't, Trixie wasn't around and we couldn't find her, and we didn't see her. And by the time we went to church, she wasn't around, and we were wondering what happened. And then when we came back from church, we saw her lying by the side of the road.
Aww.
And she was dead. She got hit by a car. And I was, at one point I was upset with Mickey because Mickey was more of a running dog, would run out way, distance away and more adventuresome. And, Mickey must have, decided
It was
to go
Mickey's
running.
fault, huh?
Yeah. But anyway, so we had Mickey a while after that.
You forgave Mickey.
Of course. Then later on, of course, this was quite some time ago. Then we got Rebel, the collie, which was a really nice dog. That was we had collie.
What was the collie dog that when I went with you, went home, you had a
That was Rebel.
That was Rebel.
That was Rebel?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, we had that. Yeah. We had that one. I can't remember how long. We had it quite a while. Yeah. That was after my dad. We had that one after my dad died too. Let's see, something else I was going to say
sorry.
about that. That's all right. No, well then during that time, I went to Troutville when I was in first grade, and I had to ride the bus and the road. That was a pretty long way, and that was in Botetourt County. We had a county school system, and there was just one. We had a couple of elementary schools in the county, and then there wasn't any like middle school. Then it was either elementary or high school, and so I went to Troutville was the closest elementary school at that time. Well, it wasn't the closest, but it was one I went to, and that was just in first grade, and my teacher was Miss Frankie, and that was one of the educators that I learned later. He said if you would have, I learned to write then upside, with my hand.
Oh, you're
like
left-handed,
this,
yeah.
And then I was left-handed, and an educator I learned later on when I was actually in seminary and learned to know him. He said if your teacher would have just turned your paper around, then you would have learned to write.
Rather than making
Rather
your
than
hand.
turning this way, if the teacher would have turned my paper, then I'd have written this way.
I'm sure that was really common though.
Oh,
for
it
left-handers.
was,
Very
yeah.
common. I mean,
Most
I'm amazed they didn't try to
of the
make you
people I knew,
right-handed.
most people I knew did the same thing.
Yeah.
But she didn't. She never tried to make me write.
Well, that's good. That was
very
something
good.
anyway.
Yeah. And she was known for giving you spankings. Well, then in my first year, I was.
Did you have a rough first year there, did you?
Wasn't bad, no. But anyway, the first grade, and but the elementary school and high school were together in Troutville, and so I don't know. We had gatherings like field days and stuff like that for Rachel, really nice, and I remember that. I never had any money like to get any pop or anything like that, but this was terrible. But one day we were playing in one of those field days, and we were there, and they had pop for sale and all this, and I asked somebody to give me a nickel for a bottle of pop, and they did.
Wow, that was.
I was one of the high school.
memorable
It was one of the
for
high
you.
school girls, and here I was just a little kid. It was pretty bold.
That's pretty bold, and it worked.
Yeah,
too.
that's right. It did. Yeah.
That was the beginning of your fundraising.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. It was, yeah. But then after that year of school, I went to Cloverdale for second and third grade.
Why did it change? Do you know?
Well, I don't know. I
Don't
mean,
know
that's
for
just
sure.
the way
Mhm.
they had the elementary school at Cloverdale, and then so I had to get off the bus there. So I still got the bus. I had to get off the bus there, and at second and third grade, I had the same teacher, Miss Wilkerson, for second and third grade, and that was during the time that I learned to ride the bicycle. How long? I would have been like what 8 or 9. Second grade would be
That would probably be 7
about
and
7,
8.
8. Yeah, about
Yeah,
8.
7.
I guess it was 8. And my grandmother, I stayed. My parents went to annual conference one of those years, and I stayed with my dad's mother, my grandmother, and my aunt and uncle had a bicycle there, and so that's when I learned to ride a bicycle. They lived at this other people's house, so and you could ride down this long road, and it's a long road to be able to learn to ride a bike, and I got learned to ride pretty well. But what I would do at the end of the long road, I mean, it was like it was probably an eighth of a mile, maybe this road was fairly long, and it was probably as long as from here to 13.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, what I would do when I got out the end of the road, I would ride out around the
In the
main
road?
highway, all the way around the highway, and it was a 4-lane road.
Oh,
So I could circle all around, see, I didn't have to stop, and could come back and ride back up the road. Well, one of the times that I was riding down there, and I was out in the highway, and my teacher, Miss Wilkerson, drove by, and she rolled down the window and yelled at me and said, "David, get out of that road and don't you ever do that again."
That was memorable for you.
That was
had
memorable.
an impact.
She was really a nice teacher. She was a pretty teacher, a really nice teacher. But anyway.
If she
That's
said
one of my
that, it
great
must
memories.
really be important.
Right, yeah, right, yeah. But I remember that. So I was really pretty young when I did that. Then after third grade, then I went to Colonial, which was down at Blue Ridge.
You changed all these schools.
Yeah, I
That's
did,
really
yeah.
something.
That's the way, because they built this new school
Oh.
and down there, which was like 4 miles away instead of 8 miles
Uh-huh.
away. And so I had to go to that school, and I guess I rode the bus down there. But then later on, I rode my bike a couple times. But anyway, so I went down there from 4, 5, 6, and 7. Yeah,
Stayed at one school for those.
three. Yeah, I went there. And then I went back to Troutville because they were both high schools. Colonial was a high school, too. And ordinarily I would have gone there, but Troutville had more college prep courses. And so I was able to go back to Troutville.
That's it. Gets you to those schools.
Mhm.
But you never had an 8th grade.
No.
There wasn't any 8th grade.
Just kind of skipped 8th grade.
Yeah, didn't have any. Yeah,
They didn't have any.
No one any. See, we didn't have that. Then of course, didn't have kindergarten either.
They didn't have kindergarten or 8th grade.
Mm-mm.
1st grade to 7,
Yeah.
and then you went to high school.
Huh.
And then
That's-
had
it's
4 years
kinda
in high
weird.
school. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, so you can see how changes really took place.
Yeah, they sure did. They
Yeah.
were adjusting things
Mhm.
a lot in those years.
Yeah. And so then after 7th grade, but I had a couple of other pretty good teachers at Colonial in the elementary school, but I did go. I was glad to go back to Troutville for high school, and that's when so then Rachel had moved. They had moved, built a house and moved next door to us. then.
About high school time.
Yeah. And then we had the first year, the bus driver that took kids to Colonial also went all around and drove to Troutville. So I could get the bus. The first year I was able to get the bus at our house, Mr. Riley bus, that
Bus
Andy
driver.
Murray wrote about.
Oh.
The big yellow school bus, Mr. Riley was
Oh.
the bus driver.
I didn't make that connection
Yeah.
at all. So he
And
must have
so he
driven the
picked
bus
me
for a
up.
long time.
For that year, for that first year, he picked me up when I was a freshman, and I could ride with him all the way to
That
Troutville.
was practically a
Then-
full-time job driving the bus.
How about that? Yeah. then they stopped, didn't allow me to do that after being a freshman. So I had to get the bus at Murray's, over where grandmother, built her house.
Several miles away.
Yeah, so that's several miles over there. So we could, had to get over there that every morning, and then of course then they dropped me off in the afternoon. Well, and that was, well, in the afternoon wasn't bad. I would usually walk home, walk across the fields.
You had time
Yeah,
then.
had some time, and I can't remember how well, I guess it must have been my sophomore year when the Raiders moved next door.
You could hitch a ride with them.
Well, Uncle T. I mean, he worked part of the time. Part of the time he didn't. But he had a couple of old cars, and so he fixed this one car up that ran pretty well, and let me drive it. And so I drove Rachel and myself over there and parked the car, and got the bus there, and then got the car back in the
It's
evening.
complicated.
Yeah, but then
You
part
did
of the
have
time
driver's license, right?
the car slipped gears part of the time.
Oh.
Anyway, that was a whole nother story. But then, so that's pretty much the way. Then the 3 years of high school, we had one of his cars that I was able to drive over there, and Rachel didn't drive yet, so. But I drove. I mean, they let me drive before I had a license. I think.
That's what I was trying to think, if you would have had a license.
Yeah, because see, the freshman year I'd have been about 13, I guess.
Right, since you didn't have 8th grade.
Yeah, and I don't know what I could get. But I got a learner's permit at 14. Anyway,
Somewhere around there.
I was able to
probably.
drive. Yeah, and I got my license as soon as I was able to get it. I think that was, I don't know, it was 15 or 16. One of them. I think
Mhm.
maybe 15 then. So that's kind of the school. But then I played. Then in high school, of course, I did. One of my favorite courses was math, and I liked math, and I liked English too, of course, and physics.
You like physics?
I liked physics.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, had 1 year of Latin because it was a teacher that could teach Latin, but then didn't have anybody that taught Latin after
After
1
that.
year.
Mhm.
And then I had 1 year of Spanish because there was a teacher that could teach Spanish.
Just kind of whatever they could teach.
Whatever,
huh?
that's good. That's exactly right. And it was really kind of amazing, that.
And you had sports that you liked in the.
Yeah, well, we didn't have a football team till after I left, but they had baseball. I played baseball and basketball. I played some basketball. I wasn't very good at basketball then because I was smaller than a lot of the other people. But I did play some basketball, and played my last couple of years, and then I kept score. That was one of my jobs all through high school. Kept score for girls games and guys games, and sang in choir, and
Kept your paper out all that time.
I did. I kept my paper. Well, I kept my paper. Yeah, I kept my paper out at least for the first 2 years of high school. But then I worked. I guess I did most of high school. Yeah, and then every summer I worked in the orchards on the farm.
You talked about that a lot. You have that where you remember working in the apple orchard.
Yeah, I did, and that was really a good job. I played. I got worked almost 10 hours a day. For
Now,
about
whose
a
apple
quarter.
orchard was that? It was,
Well, I worked for the Murrays.
right.
Andy Murray's dad and his brother. I mean, they ran the Murray orchards. I worked for them. I worked for the Crumpacker brothers. They kind of shared their labor, and so if one wasn't busy, you went to work for the other one.
So the Crumpacker brothers, they wouldn't have been your uncles.
Well, it'd been my mother's uncle.
Your mother's
Yeah, my
uncles.
mother's uncles. John and Emery Crumpacker. The way that whole valley was divided up to this one
The
family.
Crumpackers.
And John and Emery had this section of the valley, and then the Murrays. See, Jenny Murray was a Crumpacker, so
Oh, okay.
she inherited the middle section here. And then there was another section that a couple of more of Emery's Uncle Emery Crumpacker's children inherited. So it took almost the whole valley
Yeah.
there. And it was all divided up. And my mother's father had a part of it, but then he sold his part to one of Uncle John Crumpacker's children. And they sold their home
Was
place.
that would have been one of his brothers then? One of his
Yeah,
brother's
his brother
children?
sold his
Mhm.
brothers, and he and Uncle Vernon. See, Uncle Vernon's my mother's brother. They bought another farm. Well, it was east of where we lived. It was all kind of in that area, but it was a different. He sold his part of the inherited property and bought another place.
Mhm.
So that's they were all, fairly close around there. But mother's father did not. He wasn't really the good farmer that the others were. And he, I guess, wasted some of his money. I don't know exactly what all the story was, but Uncle Vernon, I think, did most of the work on that farm. Anyway.
So I remember visiting Uncle Vernon and Aunt Bessie. Would they have been in that same
No,
house?
that was
No?
when they lived down in Blue Ridge then,
Okay.
and that was they had stopped farming. They weren't farming at that time.
They
I
were
think
definitely
had
retired
stopped,
by
yeah.
then.
And Vernon might have had some other job.
Seemed like he had
part-time
a
or
job, but I don't know what it was.
He
I
did,
don't
yeah,
remember what
because
it was.
he'd given up farming then. I know he didn't.
He was a likable fellow.
Yeah, he was. He had a
Jasper.
stiff finger.
Oh yeah.
Remember, he used to flip you with his finger.
But he
never
was
did
very
you, but
kind.
he-
I don't remember him flipping me. I think he flipped you and let me watch. You
Yeah,
know.
I think that's probably right. Yeah. But then he had, of course, 3 daughters. Louise and June and Anne, and then he was my mother's brother, and then their oldest brother was Jasper.
I remember
You remember
Jasper.
Ned?
Yeah, Ned, his
was
son.
Jasper's son.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Reba was their
Right.
twin.
Okay.
I remember all that.
And,
Just very vaguely.
yeah. And then
And I do remember Glenna, and I don't remember Cecil
Mhm.
very well. Was
Well,
he-
do you remember Glenna?
I
don't
do.
know. Did you meet her?
Mm.
I thought so. I mean, it seemed like she had really dark. She dyed very dark.
You're
hair.
right.
I do
She's exactly
remember.
right. She dyed her hair kind of a reddish, almost.
I never felt like I knew her, or never felt comfortable talking with her. So I must not have met her very much.
Yeah, well, she was kind of a strange.
Well, she just wasn't as she didn't come across as warmly
Yeah,
necessarily.
that's right. Yeah.
Is she the oldest sister?
Jasper
Jasper
was the
was
oldest.
and then
Jasper's oldest, and Glenna
Glenna.
was next, and then Mother was next, and then Vernon
and
and
Claudine.
Claudine. That's
Mhm.
right. Yeah, that's all of
So-
them.
But Cecil. So when did Uncle Cecil die? I'm trying to
Well,
remember.
I'm
if
trying to think. I don't remember when he died, but he served a lot of different churches. He was in pastoral ministry his whole life. He served a couple churches in Pennsylvania, but then he came back to Virginia, and he was up in the valley at Woodstock, and some other places. Or maybe.
I just vaguely remember. I think meeting Glenna.
He had a
but
glass
I don't
eye.
remember her. Well, I did. Oh, that rings a bell.
Yeah,
That
he
rings a
did.
bell because that's
Yeah.
such when you're a kid, that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's right. I remember he would take it out sometimes.
Oh, I don't remember that. I remember you talking about
I
that.
remember that, yeah. And then, but I told you, he was really interested in my career. I mean, I'm sure it was more subtle probably, but he certainly influenced me in thinking about
Must
ministry.
have.
I think he did. But anyway, because he would kind of keep track of me, and then he, trying to think now. Well, anyway, I guess maybe he would talk about me. I don't remember much of him talking to me about ministry, and maybe I should think about it or something. I don't remember much about that. But I do know that the first annual conference I went to, I was the delegate from Cloverdale. And I
Were you
went
in
with
high
him.
school then?
Yeah, I was in high school and went with them. Went with them to annual conferences in Orlando, Florida, and Gloria was along. Gloria was pregnant then, but I didn't know it, and I don't think her parents knew it then. But
Gloria, wait a minute.
that's their oldest
Oh,
daughter.
okay.
She She and Rachel and myself are very close in age.
Okay, I remember Rachel. I don't remember Gloria.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm not
You,
sure if I
yeah, you would have met her at one of those reunions.
Okay.
That's where you would have met her at one or two of those.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a nice person, but she she got married when she was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess they had a pretty good marriage.
Good. Yeah.
Lasted and.
That must
They
have been
had
stressful
four-
for her though. That
Yeah,
part,
it really was.
Yes, I'm sure.
Especially with their parents not knowing
Yes,
that, and that
yes.
was really difficult. And of course, we weren't like close enough for her to really talk about
Right.
that with me.
That would be
And,
awkward anyway.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, right. And of course, you talked about that kind of stuff even less than they do now.
Absolutely.
Much less than they do now. And well, anyway, so I went to. But this is this is not something we put into history, but I went with them to annual conference, which he was just like Cecil was just really nice to me. He was always very nice to me, and of course I guess he thought he had he did have some energy invested in me, and if it hadn't been for him, who knows what I'd have
Right.
been doing, where I'd been or anything. But anyway, so I was a delegate, and it was a good experience. But I roomed with Edgar Martin, who was a pastor in the Roanoke area, and he was, and I knew this was a possibility, but he was a person who, really preyed on boys,
Oh.
and he was a pastor, but and we knew, but there was,
And you
it was
knew
kind
that?
of known. I knew it.
If you kind of had heard. Or,
Yeah, and I kind of heard it. So I was just enough that I was going to be on my guard, and I did have to be really on my guard because he kind of, I thought tried to approach me, but I
you were strong enough
turned him
to.
away, and I just then nothing more happened. But I knew him
Good grief.
for a lot of years. But yeah, and there was a boy in the Daleville church when he was pastor over at the Daleville church. This guy was, and this boy over there that he really had a relationship with, and it was a really
That's awful.
bad situation, terrible situation. And that's the framework that some people have about gay relationships.
Mm-hmm.
That where there've been predators.
But that's not what that is.
It's not what it is
not
at all,
what that
and that's
is.
why
A
it's
predator is a whole
people to,
different thing
yeah.
than a
Yeah.
gay person.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a sidelight on that story. But then, so as I say, that was basically a good experience at conference. I remember it rained a lot. It was in Orlando, Florida. But and I remember hearing INH Beam speak at that time. You remember stories about him? Well, Anna Mal's brother.
Oh, I remember Anna Mal. But I
Yeah,
don't
and
remember
INH Beam was he was this guy that he had a reputation that people, especially in the East, especially in Virginia, West Virginia, and around, that their buses would even stop for him and pick him up because he was a great hitchhiker.
Oh,
And
he was well
he
known
was an elder.
hitchhiker.
Yeah, he
was
was an elder in the church and quite a
Mr.
kind
Moore
of a
particularly.
philosopher and all this. A really little bitty guy and probably like maybe 5 feet tall or something.
He had a
like that.
reputation then.
He
Everybody
really,
knew.
he really did, yeah.
Aww. Oh, Dynamite. David Rogers Dynamite. Let's see. David Rogers Dynamite.
One of my
Oh, read underneath it.
Let's see. Hobby. Taking care of the fair sex. What seemed
I thought it
doing
was
most? Arguing with Mr. Moore. You
yeah.
remember that.
Yeah.
Basketball manager, 47, manager, 44, 45, 46, president, 45, 46, library club, 44, junior play, 46, glee club, 44, 45, 46, 47, vice president, 47, editor-in-chief of memoir, 47, baseball, 47, senior play, 47. So you are busy man. Such a socialite.
Well, it was, when the problems was I didn't have a,
Did you want to look at that? Sorry.
well, sorry, go ahead. But I didn't have well, we only had one car, and we lived 7 or 8 miles away.
You would probably just stay at school, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, I would like to have stayed
Yeah.
at them, but I couldn't. But I think there was it must have been like least my senior year. I must have given up the paper out because
You had had to be
baseball
involved in all
practice
that
and
stuff, yeah.
Hmm.
But it's funny,
Dynamite.
I don't remember. Mr. Moore gave me that nickname.
Dynamite, that's why.
He was
So
a,
why are you
he
arguing
was a
with
veteran.
Mr.
Well,
Moore?
because he was a veteran, and he had spent time in Russia, and he taught civics and history. And I don't know how much he really knew about it, but anyway, we
This is
would-
why you were arguing with him.
we would really get a number of discussions, and it was really not bad.
Were they heated?
But not terribly heated, but we would argue about
Uh-huh.
some things. Not so heated, but he was also a basketball coach. See, so.
So you would be arguing about civics or war and peace?
About
and,
war and peace,
yeah.
about war and peace,
Mhm.
that kind of
Since
thing.
you were Church of the Brethren, Peace Church,
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
that's been kind of rambling around here.
Let's see what's this one.
The X's.
Let's see what you plan
Class
out.
prophecy. David Rogers has now established himself in the parsonage of the Troutville Brethren Church. Look out, girls, he's still a bachelor.
Oh, gee.
Good grief.
But, oh, gee, I've forgotten about that. Is that the senior one or which one is it?
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay. Yeah, that's that's the year that.
I bet you were pretty well known because you're a pretty active person and talkative and outgoing.
Yeah.
And it's not a huge class.
No.
No, it wasn't.
Very small class.
28
Mhm.
people in the class. They let's see, was it that year? No, I think it was the year before that. We had this 34 Ford that, and we had a double date with Rudy Skaggs was a good friend of mine. You knew Rudy. You
Yeah,
remember
he's
Rudy
in there.
Skaggs.
Yeah, he's a really neat guy. And we were double dating, but I was driving, and he was dating a girl that was over in the Troutville area, and I was dating a girl that was in that area too. And so I don't know where we'd been, but anyway, going back home, and the car quit. It was.
This was an old car. Did you say
It was
a
in 1934, but that wasn't so. Well, it was several years old. I mean, it had a good many miles.
Because
on
you were
it.
in high school, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was in 47. Well, this was 40. That was like 46.
Yeah.
I think then.
That's an old.
But anyway, the car quit, and so here we had these two girls, and
Yeah, right. The car quit. Yeah, right. Flat tire.
right in the middle of town. It was right in the middle
Oh,
of
it was
Troutville.
obvious. Okay.
So anyway, I went to there was a store in the middle of town. Mr. Painter owned the store, and so he knew who I was, and so I went and knocked on the door, and I said, Mr. Painter, we have this problem, and I said my car's quit, and we have two girls that we need to get home, and so anyway, you can help me out. He let me have his truck.
Oh, so he let you drive
He
his
let me have his truck, and Rudy took his girlfriend home, and I waited,
Mhm.
and he came back. Then I took my girlfriend home, and then I drove his truck home. See, so you see, that was like 7 or 8 miles. I had to go back.
And then how did you get home? Then?
Well, I drove his truck home.
Oh, to your
He let
home.
me
not
take
to,
his truck
okay.
home that night,
Good.
which was
grief.
a really neat guy,
That's
you know.
very nice.
And it was
yeah.
like a delivery truck kind of thing. So, and I remember driving up through. You remember the driveway? We had
like
in our
winding
house, yeah.
kind of drive. Yeah.
And I remember driving up through there and drove through the driveway. Just barely could get through that. You remember
That's
that
awful.
brick driveway that was on
It
the
was
side
that
of the
narrow,
house?
huh?
You remember that it was on the side of the house?
And then
the
you
old
had
house.
you drove through
Yeah.
the,
Yeah.
It's like a tunnel.
right, a tunnel.
yeah.
yeah.
Narrow.
It wasn't much
It was
space.
that
Go around the
narrow,
curve.
huh?
Yeah, it was pretty
Oh,
narrow.
because it was a delivery truck. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
it
what
was
you
like
yeah.
thought.
But anyway, I got through. I didn't scrape anything.
You didn't?
No, I
Whoa.
didn't. And my dad heard. He'd heard that sounds different from the car.
Did
Well,
you ever
he
get
did-
that
he did.
car back running again?
Well, we had to draw it in. We had to get a motor. I had to put a motor
Good
in.
grief.
Got a used motor to put in it. because we didn't have money to buy a new car, another car. And I can't remember how I got Mr. Painter's truck back, but anyway, got the truck back.
Good grief.
But then, I thought that was such a neat
That was
guy
great that he did
Oh, my
that,
goodness.
yes. But you spent more time taking those girls
Yeah, that's
home
right.
than on the date,
That's
probably.
right. Yeah, we
You
were
know,
trying to get
yeah.
all that done.
Right.
Yeah, her name was Hazel Overstreet. Had to take her home there because she lived several miles out of Troutville. I can't remember who Rudy was dating.
Hope
Anyway.
nobody got in trouble from past curfew.
Oh goodness, yeah, that's right.
Mm,
So anyway, that was
That's good.
didn't thought about that for a while.
But see, it's fun when,
It is
when
fun, yeah. Right,
memories
yeah.
crop up for those things.
Yeah, it really is. Is this enough for now? Do you
Yeah,
wanna-
let's go ahead and take a break and pick it
Okay.
up tomorrow. It's getting a little bit.
Is this
late
kind of
right
what
now,
you
so-
want?
Oh,
Is this all right?
absolutely. I think this is
Yeah,
great
okay.
stuff.
That's a little over an hour. That's pretty good.
Well, if it works out, I mean, this works well for me. Started at Sears in the fall. Let's see, in the fall
We
of
first went
1950, 51, and then and worked at Sears until I had an opportunity to interview for this job at the church. And then when I got that job, see, that was the spring of the next year, and then I started working at the church, and then I quit my job at Sears because I was working. I was a minister to youth and did some other assistant pastor stuff. You
It's
know.
just too much.
Yeah, it was. I couldn't do both things, and I enjoyed the work at the church. It was just a lot of good experience. I mean, it was really worth a couple of years of education. And the pastor he wasn't a great preacher, but he was a really nice guy to work with. He let me do a lot of things, and I got to do some preaching and just got to do a lot of working with the youth, which I really enjoyed. And mom did some things like we went on a retreat with the youth at Lake Geneva, and Mom-in-law on that. It was like a weekend in the wintertime. That
Took
was
Cindy
enjoyable.
with you? Took Cindy with you?
No, was it Gladys and Dale?
Was it Gladys and Dale or Dick
Took care of
and,
her one
Dick and
time.
Joanne?
And then, let's see, Dick Miller took care of, maybe once or twice. Remember, he gave us his bill for charges for each pity pat.
Each,
Yeah.
Wasn't he the one that you exchange Halloween?
Yeah, he called
Yeah.
me the witch, yeah.
Yeah,
And
you
I
became-
started going to school some
Mhm.
before Cindy was born, and then worked PBX,
Worked in the
Exchange.
office, yeah, with the
which is a
telephone.
private branch exchange.
Oh,
telephone
yeah,
where
yeah,
you-
yeah.
Where you plugged her
Mhm.
Yeah,
How
plug
about
in the
that?
in the office. Gladys and I both
Mhm.
did
She
that.
worked in the
Yeah.
office, and that's what she did.
Yeah.
And that, and of course, then as I say, well, I stopped the Sears job, but then we stayed in Chicago that summer, and I worked at the church all that summer, but also worked for the seminary because the church job was really a part-time job. And then Dale and I both worked there. We actually cleaned rooms and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
You know, it was a fun job, fun stuff.
Then
But
we told you
then-
he got the porter's job.
Dale did.
No.
No, I did.
Oh, you got the
And I had the
porter's job.
porter's job, and that meant every day I had every night I had to lock up all the buildings. See, Bethany had several buildings around, and so I was responsible to go around and lock them up each night. And then we had to also be available through an intercom system that if people
Oh,
were
lock
late
themselves
coming
out.
in,
Mhm.
yeah, they would push the button and say who they were, and then I would push the button to let them in, or sometimes
That could be all hours, couldn't it?
Yeah, it could
was.
be. That's right.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we had- but it was it paid our rent. I mean, we got
Yeah, we got rent.
that's basically what we got was our rent for that. But that's and then that first year, that's when we developed our friendships with the gang
Mhm.
because we sat in classes. I remember sitting with on kind of one side of a couple of classes with Dick Miller and Dale, and myself, and then Earl and Don were kind of over on one of the other sides, and we just, Earl and I were already friends, so we just kind of got together, and then Glenn Zug became part of the group, and so all of us, that we just developed, we started doing things together there.
But that first year, we shared an apartment. They were really, really full. I mean, there was a lot of students coming in. And so they cleaned out one of the professor's studies room. And so we shared an apartment with this other couple. We had a bedroom. They had a bedroom. And both of us had a kitchen.
Was that with the Fikes?
No,
this
it
was somebody.
John and
Just some
Gaynell
miscellaneous.
Sayre,
John and
which
Gaynell Sayre.
we did know them from Bridgewater, but he was a veteran, and they were older, and she was
Yeah.
older, and he was older, and so we shared
We
that.
shared a kitchen. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
We had to just, have our meals.
We had to kind of alternate.
Well,
we
yeah,
didn't,
if you didn't want to eat together,
No.
We
We
did.
you
didn't.
didn't want to.
No, we didn't. It wasn't. They just weren't that kind of person. We got along okay, but they just weren't. Well, they weren't like the gang was. You could just feel really comfortable and at ease with them. But
They're
that
pretty,
was only one
Older
term.
and strict. I mean, it was just a different
Yeah,
look with them.
yeah.
So it was a generational difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
almost a generational difference, but just very different personalities. And he was I was trying to say he was more serious, but I don't know
Yeah.
if he was more serious, but he probably was more serious
Call
than I
them
was.
strict. Call them strict. So.
Yeah, and she was, Gaynell was not as easygoing as Mom was. I mean, she was really very pretty rigid in terms of her structure and all that kind of thing. And also, he was a garbage collector. He would clean up anything that was left on the table.
Particular.
Yeah, she would just tell him, "Here, John, finish this," and he would.
Oh, that's Brian.
But we did, Shirley. We just stayed with them for that was the first semester though, wasn't it? We weren't
Was
there
it
the whole
more
year.
than that? Seemed like more.
Seemed like more, huh?
Seemed longer.
Yeah, it did seem like
Yeah, it did
anyway,
Oh,
that was kind of a